Meteorologists are confirming a bizarre weather anomaly for 2026. Northern regions are currently experiencing a direct summer transition, with temperatures spiking up to 30 degrees Celsius above normal for March, entirely erasing the season of spring. This dual-axis line chart tracks terrorism fatalities over the last decade. While the descending line shows global deaths hitting a 10-year low, this sharply spiking line reveals a 280% surge in fatalities within Western nations, driven heavily by radicalized lone wolf attacks. Geopolitical anxiety is also radiating outward from West Asia, where a major regional conflict is now entering its fourth punishing week. Iranian state media claims their indigenous air defense systems successfully tracked and targeted a Western F-35 stealth fighter. The U.S. military has confirmed an emergency landing of the aircraft, though they deny it was shot down. The domestic fallout is already hitting the United States. President Trump is threatening to deploy Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agents to major U.S. airports to manage international travel as a partial Homeland Security shutdown looms. Simultaneous shocks across climate, domestic security, and military escalation show that the predictive models governments have relied on for decades are breaking down in real time. The central shift driving this instability is a geopolitical strategy known as the user pays security model. This map shows the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point for the world's energy supply. As the U.S. pulls back its fleets, Washington is telling Asian nations like Japan and China they must personally protect their shipments through this corridor. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has already reacted to this vacuum, placing a direct call to Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian to demand the absolute safeguarding of navigational freedom for Indian energy vessels. International energy security is no longer guaranteed by an American umbrella. Defending supply lines is now a localized cost that individual countries have to bear on their own. European markets are reacting to the standoff with immediate panic. The EU has urgently instructed member states to start filling their winter gas storage facilities right now, months ahead of schedule, to hedge against extreme price swings. This descending trendline tracks the Indian rupee, crashing to a record low of 93.71 against the US dollar. The currency's collapse maps directly against skyrocketing oil import costs. As geopolitical energy shocks widen India's trade deficit, the rupee's value is dragged further down. In chaotic times, investors typically flee to the safety of precious metals. Yet, after weeks of record highs, both gold and silver experienced a sudden, sharp drop in value yesterday. Institutional investors are being squeezed by these overlapping global crises. They're actively liquidating their safe haven assets simply to generate the emergency cash needed to cover margin calls elsewhere in their portfolios. When energy pipelines, emerging currencies, and precious metals all take a hit at the exact same time, it proves that traditional financial safe harbors offer zero real protection. Despite these overlapping crises, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, is currently projecting a surprisingly resilient global growth rate of 3.3% for the year. This economic momentum is not being driven by international trade. Instead, aggressive adaptability and massive technological investments by the private sector are offsetting the geopolitical damage. We are seeing this adaptation in real time, with tech conglomerate SoftBank announcing a massive $500 billion investment to build out artificial intelligence data centers in Ohio. Mega corporations are intentionally pouring their capital into localized digital infrastructure, choosing to build within secure domestic borders rather than relying on highly vulnerable international supply chains. The billions of dollars lost to fractured supply chains and volatile commodity markets eventually have to be covered by someone. The parent company of massive restaurant chains like Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse recently issued a highly cautious outlook for late 2026. They are facing a severe squeeze from both rising raw food costs and higher labor expenses. The pain is also hitting domestic travel. India has just lifted its domestic airfare caps, giving airlines the freedom to pass their surging fuel and operational costs directly to flyers starting Monday. Consumers trying to navigate this wave of inflation will need to be tactical. Strict travel budgeting and specifically targeting off-peak hours for flights are becoming necessary strategies to avoid severe pricing markups. Corporations and governments are declining to absorb the shock of global volatility. The financial toll of the Hormuz standoff is now printed directly on the average consumer's receipt. Physical survival is also becoming an exercise in localized crisis management. severe flash flooding has swamped parts of Hawaii, forcing mandatory evacuation orders for thousands of residents as climate extremes overwhelm state resources. But we are also seeing communities proactively adapt to these extremes. Across Gujar, massive World Water Day initiatives are taking root as residents prepare for the intense heat of the direct summer. The core survival strategy gaining traction in these urban households is the pursuit of negative net water usage, an approach where homes capture and recycle more water than they consume from the municipal grid. Citizens are reviving traditional methods like the underground tanka, a historical stone reservoir for rainwater harvesting, and linking them directly with modern domestic water recycling systems. As superpowers pull back their fleets and global economic networks fracture under the strain, the final, most reliable line of defense for both economic and environmental survival is hyperlocal independence.